A change of the guard for the Golden State. Californians will select a new senator for the first time in 24 years.
I've been a prosecutor and a public servant my entire career.
I do work with liberals and conservatives, right-wingers and left-wingers.
I'm the chairman that actually won elections in this state.
We need to focus on policies that will grow the economy, expand the pie, and give people opportunity.
I have 20 years experience in the United States House of Representatives.
Our California Counts debate, the race for the Senate, starts now.
Welcome to our California Counts debate. I'm Amita Sharma with KPBS News, and we're broadcasting live across the state from the KPBS studios on the campus of San Diego State University. For the next hour, we will hear from the top 5 candidates running to replace retiring U.S. Senator Barbara Boxer. The debate is a partnership between KPCC in Los Angeles, KQED in San Francisco, Capital Public Radio in Sacramento, and Univision here in San Diego. The candidates with us tonight are Tom Del Beccaro, former head of the California Republican Party, Bay Area entrepreneur and publisher Ron Unz, who is a Republican, Orange County Congresswoman and Democrat Loretta Sanchez, California Attorney General Kamala Harris, also a Democrat, and Duff Suntime, also a former head of the California Republican Party. Our panel of journalists are Scott Schaefer, senior politics editor for KQED, reporter Marco Serrano from Univision, Linnea Admire, managing editor for Capital Public Radio, and Mary Plummer, senior politics reporter for KPCC. Our audience is made up of students and faculty from San Diego State University. We did a random drawing to determine the order of questions for candidates this evening. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the questions. I will keep the candidates on time since we have a lot to get to in this hour. We ask our studio audience to hold their applause until the end of the debate. And you can join the conversation at #CACounts. Let's get started with the opening statements. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to this question. Mr. Unz, what is it about your life experience that makes you the best person for this job?
There are 5 candidates on this platform, 2 Democrats who are part of the establishment of the Democratic Party. They've been in office for over 30 years. They're both ardent supporters of Hillary Clinton. If you're a Hillary Clinton Democrat, they're your choices. The 2 Republicans on this platform's claim to fame is that they're former chairman of the state Republican Party. If you're a supporter of the establishment Republican Party, they are your candidates. But if you're a Donald Trump supporter, if you're a Bernie Sanders supporter, if you're someone who supports Ron Paul, who recently endorsed me, I'm the candidate to look at because I'm an independent-minded Republican. I may have never held any elective office, but I think I've accomplished more than all the other people on the platform with me. 20 years ago, I changed the law in California and ensured that millions of immigrant children were taught how to read English, write English, and speak English. They've become productive citizens of our society. 5 years ago, I launched the minimum wage.
We've got to pause it there. Mr. Del Beccaro.
Do you see any need for additional federal legislation to control access to guns and reduce gun violence? And if so, what steps would you support as senator?
Well, I'm somebody who looks at things in realistic rather than propagandistic or ideological way. I just don't see the gun issue as being substantive in terms of crime, in terms of murder rates in the United States. I mean, it's easy, for example, to play that up either on the right or the left. When we're talking about what really makes a difference in crime in the United States, it's more the drug issue. We've had a 40-year failed war on drugs in America, and I think we have to reassess that policy. Pointing to dangerous-looking weapons and saying that banning those particular strange-looking weapons will solve the problem of murder in the United States is just rhetoric. It's not reality. And there's no evidence from international comparisons that there's a strong correlation between local gun control laws and the murder rate in a given country. So guns are a distraction.
Mr. Del Beccaro.
Thank you.
Mr. Unz, in which way would you address immigration?
I think immigration is an absolutely crucial issue, and we have to look at a package that works politically, that can get through Congress. I support comprehensive immigration reform, but a crucial component of comprehensive immigration reform must be a drastic cut in legal immigration levels. Right now, we have a situation where vast numbers of American workers are under wage pressure because of 1.3, 1.4 total immigrants coming in. There's nobody, I think, in California in public policy who has a longer and stronger track record of being pro-immigrant. But being pro-immigrant does not necessarily mean pro-immigration. I think if we include a 50% cut in legal immigration, we can get the package through Congress and solve our immigration problems.
Thank you, Mr. Unz.
Mr. Zolberg.
From Capital Public Radio in Sacramento, and she will direct it to Ron Unz. Linnea.
Part of the tension around immigration deals with refugee resettlement. So 10% of the 10,000 Syrian refugees that the U.S. is committed to taking in will arrive in California. Considering the cost, security concerns, and potential stress on public services, what is your position about resettling refugees in the United States?
I think the vast majority of immigrants we get are very decent, hardworking people who are certainly not terrorists or any danger to our society. The problem is the numbers. In other words, the overall numbers of legal immigrants are simply too high and are putting too much stress on us. If we're talking about allocating those numbers among refugees or among other legal immigrant groups, I don't have any problem with saying refugees should get some of the slots. 10,000 is not a large number, and I certainly am not somebody to demagogue the issue of foreign immigrants coming from a particular country. I'm sure most of those people are just as decent and hardworking as all the other immigrant groups coming here. What I think we have to do is put an overall cap on the numbers, so I don't have any particular problem with refugee immigrants as opposed to other immigrants.
Thank you, Mr. Unz.
Mr. Del Caro, you were talking.
Mr. Unz, your take on the minimum wage law and what would you do to create higher paying jobs in California?
For 5 years, I've made the minimum wage, raising the national minimum wage, one of the centerpieces of my issues. I launched the national minimum wage movement 5 years ago. I shifted the position of the Democratic Party on that issue towards a much higher minimum wage. One of my strongest issues, if I were a U.S. Senator, would be raising the national minimum wage to $12 an hour. Now, the truth is, I think 15 is probably too high in California. It's fine for San Francisco, it's fine for LA, it's fine for Silicon Valley, but it's troublesome for the Central Valley where the cost of living is too much lower. I think we have to look at the issues rationally and economically rather than ideologically. With regard to raising incomes around the country for workers, the most important step we can make is to drastically reduce current immigration. It's supply and demand. The more workers that come in, the more pressure there is on the wages of existing workers. The greatest beneficiaries of a sharp reduction in legal immigration would be existing immigrants and existing workers.
Thank you, Mr. Unz. Let's move on to the environment. Mr. Unz, I'll repeat the question for you as well. Do you support current environmental laws, and what action would you take to either strengthen or demolish them?
I'm the only individual standing on this platform who has a scientific background. I'm a theoretical physicist by training. I studied under some of the top researchers at Harvard, Stanford, and Cambridge. I've followed the shifting debate on global warming now for about 30 or 40 years. It's gone back and forth. I'm a scientist. I know what I know and what I don't know. I'm not persuaded that the evidence is there and that the evidence is strong enough for us to restructure our entire economy. But here's something that's a practical issue, an important issue. From the time that I was born in Los Angeles in the early 1960s, California's population has increased by 150%. If you're talking about a direct impact on our environment, on our resources, on our water supply, when you increase the population by 150%, that has an impact. Almost all of that increase has been driven by foreign immigration, and that's why I think we have to cut immigration, legal immigration, by about 50%.
Thank you, Mr. Unz. Mr. Del Caro. Thank you, Mr. Unz. What would you like to see happen to the nuclear waste from San Onofre?
Well, in that particular case, I'd have to look at the science, form an independent judgment, and make a decision that I thought was best for the people. Now, I mean, the truth is, I have not looked at the science regarding the question of whether burying the nuclear waste in that location or not is a reasonable hazard to take. But the truth is, I mean, that really is a perfect example of how the media sometimes distracts us from issues that are significant to issues that are peripheral. I mean, obviously, not a single person has died from that waste right now. In the past, I've focused, for example, on the Vioxx scandal, which, according to the FDA, killed tens of thousands of Americans. When you look at the data, it's possible that hundreds of thousands of Americans died. Nobody was punished. It was ignored by the media. And I bet 99% of the people in the audience here aren't aware that tens or even hundreds of thousands of Americans died because of Vioxx and nobody was punished. The media should focus on reality rather than risk possible dangers in the future, which may or may not exist.
Mr. Unz, thank you. Mr. Unz, what would you do to make getting a university degree more affordable for anyone who wants to go to college?
That's an issue I've been very heavily involved in the last year. It's ridiculous how expensive it's become. Take the UC system. University of California. In the mid-1970s, annual tuition was $630 a year. $630. Now it averages $15,000. There's been massive inflation, far, far higher than regular inflation across all these public schools and universities. And the reason is partly because the expenses have gone up unreasonably. The number of administrators, not faculty members, not the people teaching the classes, but the administrators, has doubled across the country in the last 20 years. That's where a lot of the money is going. What we need to do is put tremendous pressure on these public schools and universities to cut their expenses, cut the quality of the undergraduate education necessary, and cut their costs by 20, 30, 40%. The textbook scandal is really ridiculous. People are being extorted hundreds of dollars a year for a textbook that shouldn't cost more than 20 or 30.
Thank you, Mr.
Maybe
Unz.
the schools should pay for the textbooks.
Mr.